The fourth chapter of Amrutanubhav is Jnana Ajnana Bheda Kathan, meaning the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. In the last chapter, Shri Dnyaneshwar said that it is necessary for both the ignorant and the knowledgeable to pay off the debt of the four speeches. In this chapter, he explains what knowledge and ignorance are and what the relationship is between them. Knowledge here doesn't mean mundane information gained through books, schools, or worldly experiences. Instead, it refers to the absolute knowledge of the Spirit. The chapter begins. When we wake up from our sleep, our wakefulness consumes our sleep, and then only wakefulness remains. Likewise, when knowledge manifests within us, it consumes ignorance, and then only knowledge remains. Like when we stand in front of a mirror, we see our reflection as something separate from us. A duality exists of the object and its reflection. But as soon as we step away from the mirror, this duality disappears and only the object remains. When we are ignorant, we exist in a state of duality of the eternal spirit and the mortal body. But when the light of knowledge falls upon us, this duality ceases to exist and we become one with the spirit. This is called self-realization. The nature of knowledge is such that it is sattva guni, which keeps us in balance. It is not rajoguni, which excites us, or tamoguni, which gives us worldly pleasures. And so, the one who has just started achieving this knowledge and who was till now conditioned to several rajoguni and tamoguni experiences observes that the rest of the world, which is still ignorant, is freely enjoying all the sense pleasures, while he himself is no longer able to indulge in them. Hence, he feels tired and depressed. This is because knowledge has not manifested completely within the seeker. It's a very dim lamp that shines very little light upon the awareness of the seeker, bright enough to show what is good and what is bad, but too dim to show the full picture and its beauty. Eventually, the seeker gives up knowledge and jumps back to the state of ignorance. All this happens because of the nature of sattva guni knowledge, which neither pleases the seekers nor flatters their ego like the other two gunas. Like a centripetal force, knowledge throws its seekers away from itself, thus ending its own existence within the seeker. Hence, knowledge is like a knife that stabs itself, or like a person who enters a room, locks the door, and then lights a fire to the house from inside, thereby destroying oneself. Or like a thief who, while robbing a house, starts tying up all the valuables he wishes to steal and eventually ties himself up too. Or like a flame that burns the camphor and eventually burns itself too. Even though ignorance is not superior to knowledge, it seems as if ignorance is the one that destroys knowledge. But in reality, when knowledge rises, it overpowers ignorance and then destroys itself too. When the oil of a lamp is about to finish, the flame burns even brighter, thereby burning the wick, only to put an end to its own existence. Knowledge rises, destroys itself, and gives rise to ignorance. Then again it overpowers ignorance, and this cycle continues. Like the cow's udder, which when gets full of milk, gets drained by the calf, and then it again gets full after some time. Or like a jasmine flower that blooms and then withers away, after which another flower blooms. Likewise, the seeker also keeps jumping between the realms of knowledge and ignorance. Ripples get created in the water and get destroyed too. Lightning gets created in the sky, illuminates it, and then finishes off on its own. Likewise, knowledge grows by consuming all the ignorance of the world and then destroys itself too. This cycle continues until the light of knowledge in the awareness of the seeker is complete. Once it is complete, knowledge remains forever in its purest form. This is similar to the time of the ultimate destruction of the world when everything gets drowned, and the distinction between land and water ceases to exist. Nothing but water remains. When the sun grows and engulfs the world, then only light remains. Darkness doesn't exist anymore. Every morning, sleep dies and we wake up. But one day, we also die with it. When that happens, then we remain as the soul who never sleeps. That is when sleep dies permanently and only wakefulness remains. From the new moon to the full moon, there are in total 16 phases of the moon, which are like the 16 forms of the moon, which exist due to its position relative to the earth and sun. But imagine a form of the moon which, irrespective of its position, always looks complete. It would be like the 17th form of the moon, which does not become brighter when light is shined upon it, nor does it become dimmer in darkness. Such a description can only suit the sun, because unlike the moon, the sun produces its own light, and hence external light cannot change its appearance. That is why that which becomes more knowledgeable due to knowledge and less knowledgeable due to ignorance cannot be knowledge. Only that which is unaffected by these two is knowledge. But even though knowledge is so pure and complete, what does it know about itself? Can our eyeballs see each other? Can the sky that contains all the stars and the planets get contained in itself? Can fire burn itself? Can one climb upon one's own head? Can vision see itself? Can taste taste itself? Can sound hear itself? Can the sun enlighten itself? Can fruits themselves produce fruits? Can aroma smell itself? Likewise, knowledge cannot learn itself. The spirit, which is the reflection of God within us, is pure knowledge. Hence, the spirit cannot understand itself. And the one who has achieved complete union with the spirit, meaning the one who is fully self-realized, has become knowledge. Such a person does not have to learn anything because he has achieved oneness with knowledge. So he just knows everything spontaneously. If this was not true, if knowledge did require the support of learning to know something, meaning if it spontaneously did not know everything and instead had to put efforts to know something, wouldn't it be called ignorance instead? Darkness, which is the absence of light, definitely doesn't see light. But does light see itself? After all, light cannot enlighten itself, so neither darkness nor light can see light. Likewise, neither ignorance nor knowledge can learn or understand what knowledge is. One might argue that if knowledge cannot be learned or understood by both the ignorant and the knowledgeable, then it might not even exist. Maybe it's just a myth. Likewise, it is also said that ultimately everything in the world is just a myth. Nothing is absolute. But if that is so, then who is it that experiences this myth? The spirit, which is indeed absolute, is the sole observer who witnesses everything. And since knowledge is the spirit, it is not a myth. When one achieves the state of shunya or nothingness, who is it that actually achieves this state? It might seem self-contradictory to say that someone has reached the state of nothingness. After all, if one is truly one with nothingness, then it means that he or she doesn't exist anymore. But that is not the case because nothingness or shunya is a subjective term. It does not literally mean that there is nothing at all. When a pot full of mud is emptied, someone might say that now there is nothing in the pot. But is there really nothing in it? There is still air in it. There is moisture, there are microscopic organisms, and so many things in it. Then how can one say that there is nothing in it? Because nothing is a relative term. Likewise, when someone says that one has reached the state of shunya, it means that the ego, conditionings, and other weaknesses have dropped off. There are yet many things that still exist within such a person, like love, compassion, dedication, and humility. Also, when something cannot be perceived by someone, It is called nothing. But in reality, it exists, irrespective of whether or not there is an observer, a witness, or a perceiver. For example, if a man who is home alone attempts to extinguish a lamp and the lamp does get extinguished, but before seeing this, if the man himself got extinguished, that is, if he died, then it means that nobody observed the extinguishing of the lamp. So, can one say that since there were no witnesses, the man did not extinguish the lamp? If a person, after having a good night's sleep, died just before waking up, and hence couldn't tell anyone how blissful his sleep was, it doesn't mean that his good night's sleep was a myth. An earthen pot looks like a pot due to its shape, and when it breaks, it looks like broken pieces of a pot. But just because it no longer looks like a pot, will anyone say that it does not exist at all? What we call as nothing or non-existence is just our perception of something. We cannot see or sense it, but it still exists in a different form or state. But if neither we nor others can see something, how can we say that it still exists? If a person slept in a jungle one night, but nobody saw him sleeping there, and he himself also forgot that he slept there, does it mean that he never slept there? In the absolute sense, he did sleep there. So that is the truth. It doesn't matter what people say about whether he slept there or not, based on their own individual perceptions. When a person shuts his eyes, he stops seeing. But that doesn't mean the world doesn't exist anymore. On a pitch black night, a dark man doesn't see himself, nor does anyone else see him. But still he knows that he exists, and that he is separate from the darkness. Likewise, existence and non-existence are merely perceptions of human beings. The formless exists, and it knows that it exists. When the night sky is fully clear and the moon and the stars are not visible, we might feel that the sky is invisible. But in reality, it is the sky alone that is visible. It is we, the observers, who had misunderstood the presence of the moon and the stars as the sky. When the water in a well is completely pure, it may appear that there is no water in it, but the water still does exist. Our internal body parts exist where they are supposed to exist, even though we may not feel them. Hence, this argument of existence and non-existence must be dropped. Upon waking up, sleep might seem to have lost its existence, but it still remains within us. Or when a pot is kept on the ground, one may address the ground as the ground that is with the pot. And when the pot is taken away, one may call it as the ground that is without the pot. But in reality, both of these titles do not affect the ground in any way. The ground remains vast and pure, irrespective of the existence of the pot. Likewise, knowledge remains all-pervading and pure, irrespective of the existence of ignorance. Even though we may not be able to see or know knowledge, it exists eternally. The chapter ends here. To conclude, pure knowledge cannot be achieved through our efforts. It eternally exists within us as the Spirit. Even though we cannot sense it or perceive it, it exists. We can't understand the Spirit through our intellectual capacity, and the Spirit itself can also not understand what it is. The joy of the Spirit is only to be experienced by getting connected to it, and the only way to get connected to it is through self-realization, which is effortlessly achieved in Sahaj Yoga. Jai Shri Mataji.